Lisa, let's just first, how do we put into words what went down yesterday at trial? And where do you think the prosecution landed with their questioning of Stormy Daniels? Was it effective, or was there some perhaps overzealousness there?
You know, Mika, I have a slightly different take on all of this than I think some folks do. I didn't think that the testimony was graphic at all. I actually thought that while she provided lots of details that were extraneous in the judge's mind at times or in Team Trump's mind, they were things like the color of the tile on the floor of the foyer of his hotel penthouse, or the fact that his toiletries kit in the bathroom had Pert Plus and Old Spice in it. When it came to what actually transpired between them, she was fairly circumspect. She added one detail about the sexual encounter that I think the judge wished she hadn't. But when he said that at times she said too much, there were things that were said that were better left unsaid, a lot of that had to do with her own state of mind and what she was experiencing at the time. In terms of the prosecution, they don't necessarily need the jury to think that she's credible. But what they want is the jury to understand what the impact of her story would have been had Michael Cohen never, in the final days of the campaign, rushed to reach a settlement with her. In other words, in a but-for universe, but for Michael Cohen's intervention and Keith Davidson representing her to get to this NDA that was ultimately signed and paid in the last days of October, what would have happened? What would the impact have been on the campaign? A campaign that was already reeling from the Access Hollywood allegations and the things that followed in those ensuing days, including a number of other women beyond Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels coming forward to the New York Times on October 10th and saying that they had been sexually assaulted by Donald Trump or victims of his sexual misconduct. That's what they want the jury to hear, is what would that have sounded like? And can you understand then why Donald Trump and Michael Cohen were ultimately motivated to want her to say nothing, given what that story would have sounded like?
Yeah, and I think I'm with Lisa here, Willie, that, it wasn't graphic sexual testimony. I mean, you would have found, you will hear more graphic, offensive statements in the first 15 seconds of the Tom Brady roast on Netflix than you heard in Stormy Daniels' testimony. That was something. Wow.
It was more just disturbing.
Kaboom. I mean, we will talk about that at some other point,
Glaser,
Willie.
2 words.
Oh, my God.
She's incredible. She's incredible.
Wow. Yeah. That's what he said. So anyway, Willie, it wasn't graphic sexually. I think what Mika's talking about, what I'm talking about, there were parts that you read and you go, oof, what's Melania thinking about it? Or oof, what's Ivanka thinking? There were things where she got into his personal life and was talking about, things that I'm sure made him extremely uncomfortable on a personal level, but she did not get into any really graphic detail other than maybe one time. She just, I'm not going to even say it on, this is a kid's show, as everybody knows, so I'm not going to even say she described one thing, but even that was pretty generalized. I do wonder, though, why the defense didn't object to it, but regardless, I don't think the prosecution heard its case. She laid out what happened, and the cross had their point back. But again, it's for people watching this. It wasn't any graphic description of sex. It was just things that I think made us all uncomfortable for Trump's family.
Yeah, I think maybe more cringy than graphic, perhaps.
Yeah,
as you listen to it,
yeah.
like you said, some of the things about Melania and Ivanka that people can all go read some comparisons he made. But so, Danny, I guess the question is, the defense did not object, but their general objection to Stormy Daniels as a witness is, what does any of this have to do? What does this tawdry detail, this salaciousness have to do with a case that the prosecution alleges is about paperwork? So what do you say to that as we listen to Stormy Daniels' testimony yesterday?
Years from now, if there's a conviction and this goes up to the appellate division and it's overturned, so far in this trial, Stormy Daniels' testimony to me stands out as the main issue that they might have on appeal. They asked for a mistrial, and you have a quote from the judge saying, oh boy, some of this stuff, maybe it shouldn't have come in. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing. But if you're a defense attorney, you're marking your notebook, and now you have your first major issue. So years from now, when we're talking about balancing the risk versus the benefit of putting Stormy Daniels on the stand, was this worth it? Consider this. I think the prosecution could have gotten most, if not all, of the evidence they needed from Stormy Daniels from other witnesses, and I think they've already done that. The transaction from Michael Cohen to Stormy Daniels, is there any doubt at this point that they've proven that element beyond a reasonable doubt? Somebody paid Stormy Daniels. It seems to be Michael Cohen. Nobody seems to really dispute that at this point. So the next thing you have Stormy Daniels on for is to describe the increasing market value of her story as the election approached. Okay, that's helpful, but we already got a lot of that from Hope Hicks. So with every witness the prosecution decides to put on, they have to do a risk-benefit analysis. What is the risk of putting this witness on the stand versus the benefit? What do we get from her? And at the end of the day, yes, they got some good stuff. And in fact, they got some really good stuff because in my view, and maybe I'm a defense attorney, maybe there's a grain of salt to be taken with this, they essentially got in character evidence about how slimy Donald Trump is. Who can unring the bell in their mind of Donald Trump waiting till she comes out of the bathroom and plopping on the bed in his boxers? Who can get the image of him answering the door in his satin jams out of their mind? They can't do that. So this was very effective. But as we just learned in the Harvey Weinstein case, if you're the prosecution and you push the envelope with the evidence you get in, this evidence is devastating. Make no mistake. We're all talking about it. So we can have a dispute about, was it really that salacious? Was it really that sexy? Was it really that prurient? Doesn't matter. The jury heard it. They can't unhear it, even if the judge strikes the testimony. Striking the testimony is often a hollow victory, a hollow benefit after the testimony's already come out. So, I mean, look, was Stormy Daniels a wise witness? Yes, in the sense that she put in all this great evidence for the prosecution, but it's evidence that has nothing to do with the elements they have to prove. This is not a sexual assault case. This is a false entries in business documents and then concealment of some other crime. So on appeal, in my view, you have your first major issue for appeal. So 2 years from now, if we're back here saying the conviction got overturned, this is terrible. Well, this might be what we look at. And we can say, well, the prosecution took a calculated risk and it's yielded benefits in the last 24 hours. But maybe in a couple of years, those benefits will not have been worth the risk.
And Lisa, that's basically, as you know, the argument that the defense has made is that this testimony yesterday from Stormy Daniels was designed just to humiliate Donald Trump in a public setting, and they say has nothing to do with what's being charged here. What do you say to that?
In a technical level, I understand what they're saying. But on another level, it has everything to do with what's being charged here. The jury has to find, in a relative absence of direct evidence that Donald Trump had knowledge of and intent to falsify business records, that he nonetheless was motivated to do it. And there's a ton of circumstantial evidence. But Michael Cohen will be the only person who gets on the stand and directly ties Donald Trump to that knowledge and intent. So what do they have to do? They have to work backwards to convince the jury Donald Trump had every motive and incentive, not only to do the deal, but to cover it up. How do you convince the jury that he had every motive and incentive? You hear, forgive the pun, straight from the horse's mouth what that interaction looked like. And for her, this was a traumatic incident. It recast Donald Trump from sort of the womanizer that we understood this episode to be about to the predator that the Access Hollywood tape made him out to be. It completely reinforces a frame of him that was existing in the political dialogue at the time and makes all the more credible why Donald Trump and Michael Cohen and all of their underlings would work so hard to conceal the true nature of the payment, disguise it instead as legal services and invoices pursuant to a retainer agreement, something that Deborah Tarasoff and Jeff McConney, in very dry testimony the day before yesterday, described in excruciating detail for the jury.
So Danny, let me push back a little bit and get some insight from you here. First of all, if the defense is letting it come in, and they're not objecting, and the judge isn't overturning the objection. Seems to me that would hurt on appeal. But on that, I think the bigger issue here is that this testimony, though really embarrassing to Donald Trump, was relevant. And it was relevant because it was embarrassing to Donald Trump. Donald Trump, and again, I don't want to repeat it here, but Donald Trump doesn't want voters, let alone his wife, to hear what he said to Stormy Daniels about the status of their marital relationship. Donald Trump doesn't want voters any more than he wants his daughter to hear what Donald Trump was saying, making comparisons there. So it seems to me that really goes to the heart. As Mika said, and Willie said, this is sort of cringe-worthy. It's not rated R testimony. It's just all very cringe-worthy. But if you're running for president of the United States, you don't want those things to come out a couple of days before the election. So doesn't the very nature of that, what makes it so cringy, what makes it almost over the top, doesn't that really go to Donald Trump's intent? Of course, any presidential candidate would want to stop this information about the status of his marriage, about an affair with a porn star, about what he said about his daughter. Any presidential candidate would not want those words out, would they?
Joe, we are in heated agreement. You're right. I mean, you do not want all that evidence that came in was helpful. But the question becomes, if you're a prosecutor and you're building your case and you're making a risk-reward balancing analysis as to every witness, you have to decide, can I get this information from somewhere else with less risk? That's why you see people like a banker called, a third party who doesn't have any skin in the game, who will give you an objective analysis of a transaction. That's why you call a Keith Davidson. That's why you call a Hope Hicks. We already heard from Hope Hicks, who was a very credible witness, that it was chaos in the White House. That everybody was worried about how this story and all the McDougal stories and everything
Danny,
else would hurt the
tell
campaign.
me, if you will, really quickly, what part of the testimony would you pull out and take up on appeal? What do you think is the defense's strongest case, specifically in reversible appeal, that it was overly prejudicial and wasn't worth the probative value?
Sure. I think Stormy Daniels' testimony could have been accomplished with 3 words, in the sense that we had sex. Everything else was probably unnecessary. And then, to me, testimony like saying, well, he was a lot physically larger than me, and I wasn't intimidated, but it's out there. He was bigger than me. He was blocking the door. It goes back to the issue. This is not a sex assault case, and the defense is going to argue, and right or wrong, this is what they will argue on appeal, that that kind of testimony turned this into a quasi-sex assault case, which painted the defendant in an unnecessarily bad light, in a way that you can't unring the bell. So my point is that, yes, it was really helpful that Stormy Daniels described an environment where her story had all this value because it was close to campaign. Even testimony, by the way, where Donald Trump didn't seem concerned about Melania finding out. That was good, and they actually elicited that in a very clever way. All the evidence about the transaction between Stormy Daniels and, yes, the underlying incident, the fact that they had sex, that she got up there and said that they had sex, that is all relevant. But you always ask the question, can you get this information from a less risky witness? We're only halfway through cross-examination. It could get worse. Maybe it won't. Maybe she'll survive and be fine. But Stormy Daniels is one of those witnesses that tends to not just answer the question asked, but add her own editorial. And that is a really dangerous thing. I promise you the prosecution is sitting at their desk saying, just answer the question. Please just answer the question. Please, just the question. No editorializing.
Sounds like you've done that before.
So many times, Joe, I cannot tell you. So many times.
So we get a day off today. Testimony, cross-examination resumes tomorrow. Lisa, you are our eyes and ears down at the courthouse. You were there again yesterday. Just some atmospherics of what it was like to be there when Stormy Daniels walks into the courtroom and sits down across from Donald Trump, a man she's now been connected to publicly for almost a decade.
Well, I think part of it Willie, the shock of seeing Stormy Daniels, she doesn't look anymore like she does in the public imagination, because in our heads, she's frozen in time in that picture in 2006 taken at the golf tournament. It's a picture that the prosecution used to great effect yesterday, but that's not the Stormy Daniels who walked into court. The Stormy Daniels who walked into court yesterday sort of looked like a cross between a suburban manicurist and a librarian. You know, she was wearing her glasses, her hair was sort of piled on top of her head in a haphazard way. The beauty is still there, but the glamour is gone. She by no means looked like an adult film star, and yet the prosecution worked really hard at the very beginning of her testimony to sort of ground her as a person of considerable intellect and ambition before she became an exotic dancer. And that speaks to the world that we live in, not the world we wish we lived in. They knew that once she sat down in that chair and she announced what she did for a living, there were going to be some cultural biases she was working against, and therefore it was really important to them to counter those by saying Stormy Daniels was a person with a full scholarship to Texas A&M University. She wanted to become a veterinarian. She stayed home for a year to save money for incidental expenses, started dancing exotically, and then she was off on a very, very different career path. But the intellect is still there. The curiosity is still there. The danger of that, however, is she wants to tell her story and live her truth. And doing that in the confines of a court proceeding that's primarily about, as Danny noted, falsification of business records, that's a challenge.
Right.